my heart, my brain. I love the steak. Oh,
Hello and
never.
welcome to Writing Our Own Story, Small Business Life here at StoryForge. Um, this is our special beta reading edition, just kind of some tips and pointers on how to be a good beta reader. Because if you're not familiar with StoryForge, StoryForge is a reading and writing platform that thrives on community. We're all about the community, getting people connected with different authors so they can read, they can help edit, they can review and give feedback on their different stories as they progress towards actually, publishing a book. If you aren't familiar with us, please check us out, storyforge.com. If you don't have an account, please sign up for a free account, and you can use the referral code podcast to get an additional 50 free quills, which is our on-platform currency. That allows you to buy things like avatars, equip your library, cool little pets. It's a lot of fun. I hope you'll join us. My name is Tim, and I will be your host today. I am the Senior Director of Operations and Project Management here at StoryForge. Joining me today is Beatrice, the Senior Director of Marketing, and Yashi, who is our Quality Assurance Analyst. So we are going to actually read a story that is on our platform. We are going to be reading Will Cast Spells for Food, Down and Out in Dystopia, Book One by Liam P. Boyle. We're not going to do the whole thing. We're going to go through, a couple paragraphs at a time, and then Beatrice and Yashi will kind of, give the feedback, explain why they said the things that they've done, and hopefully this gives anyone out there listening better understanding of how to be a good beta reader because you can be a reader, but it's hard to be a good beta reader if you don't know what you're doing. Beatrice, you have a little background in beta reading, using beta readers, being a beta reader. Explain the point of beta readers.
Better reading is a work. It's a tool that authors use in order to make sure that their stories are ready for an audience even before they are sent to an editor. And uh, it's like a very reader focused pass on editing before actual editor editing. One of the things that I have seen over the years is that people are trying to expect things that would be corrected or enhanced or edited by a professional editor that has a lot of editing background. And that is not necessarily the case with better reading. It's more of a reader focused thing. Things like, is this scene something that you as a reader understand? Is it something that maybe bores you? Do I have to make a change to make sure that you are engaged? Do you believe that this character's plot is consistent with their personality? One of my favorite things to look at both that I ask to my beta readers and that I like to look at when I'm beta reading is if the promises that are made throughout the book are being fulfilled by the end of the book. It's things it's that has to make sure that structurally your story makes sense and it's good and strong for the audience that it's going to go to before you get to the very nitty-gritty aspects of editing.
Awesome. Yashi, anything else you want to add to that?
Sadly, no. Beatrice actually got everything I wanted to say as well.
Okay. So for those of you who might be listening on Spotify or something like that, I'm actually going to share my screen. We are going to look at the platform with with the actual story, but we will be narrating the story. Um, my apologies to Liam. I am probably going to butcher some of these names. Some of these words. Words are hard. But I am going to do my best. So we are going to start with the prologue. And right away, the character's name is Kahan Torintha, day one, 22 August 2173 CE. The Appalachian Mountains may not be the tallest or most notable of mountain ranges, but they were old. older than the development of terrestrial life, older than bones. While magic may have disappeared from the world for just over a millennium, it still lingers in the deep places beneath these ancient stones. This was where she needed to be. This was home. She looked over. Oh, store feedback just popped up. Feel free to ever fill that out if you're reading. She looked over at the four eggs nestled in the rock bed she heated for them with the occasional bursts of her flaming breath. They had been safe in this place since before her long sleep, while magic had drained from this world, before finally returning. Khan Torintha looked at the eggs. They had survived 1,000 plus years of magical drought thanks to the little magic that remained in this ancient place. And now that magic was back in the world, there was finally hope of their hatching. Her darkly iridescent feathers rustled as she shifted. Even after her long sleep, she was so tired. One flight after the return of magic and her awakening was all she had managed. Yet flying through the storms again had felt glorious. The winds buffeting her wings, the energy of the lightning and thunder surrounding her, the freedom of being able to fly again. But then the fatigue came back as the storm ended, and her clutch was calling. She was old. Seeing this clutch hatching was the last thing she would do. But she would see this clutch hatch. The world would not be left without a thunderbird. She settled down to nap while she guarded her eggs. The faintest echoes of voices came through the cavern system. Immediately, she pulled herself up to go track down the source of the sound. The eggs must be protected at all costs, she thought. Quickly, she began searching through the caverns to find the interlopers. The voices became clearer as she traveled. They were human voices, speaking the new language that she first heard after waking from her 1,000-year sleep. She turned into another cavern tunnel, and she saw them, a group of humans shining with their glint of metal from their equipment and bodies. They had lights mounted on their heads and the rod-like objects they held in their hands. There she is, just where we were told she would be. Fire! Thunderous noise erupted, and she felt sharp, hot pellets hitting her skin. Sulphurous smoke filled the tunnel as the noise continued. Pain increased as more of the hot pellets tore through her feathers, scales, and skin. The cavern tunnel was too small for her to spread her wings. Her anger rose as current discharged from the electrocyte organs along her body's length, sending electrical arcs in all directions. The humans kept doing whatever was making the sound, and she saw clearly the flashes of fire from the rod-like objects they carried, now held up and pointed at her. She inhaled as she tried to move closer to the humans. The pain was getting more intense. While each individual pellet hurt only a little, she was being hit with hundreds of them. Blood flowed freely from the increasing number of wounds, and her feathers were shredded from the assault. Finally, she closed. Finally, close enough, she let loose a blast of flame that filled the tunnel, and the current arcing off her skin finally found the humans. Several screams rewarded her ears, but this must have been the larger group. Wow, excuse me. S Several screams rewarded her ears, but this must have been a larger group than she thought because the assault kept going. The bleeding was slowing down, and the darkness was creeping into the edges of her vision. Still, the humans would not stop as her vision finally dimmed. Her only thought was on her precious clutch. She's down. Med team forward. Get the eye, shouted one man as the sparks coming off of Khan Tortha's body finally stopped. Apologies. I am obviously not a professional voice reader. Doing my best here, though.
I think you did good.
Thank you. All right. What are your thoughts? What as a beta reader, what feedback would you provide here?
Joshua, do you want to start since I gave the intro?
Yeah. Um, so there are some places where I've noticed a bit of repetition that I think worked really well for the story, but I think there were some ways that it kind of threw me off. Like in the second paragraph, there was she looked over the four eggs nestled in the rock bed. And then it goes to the next sentence and then it goes back to the character looking at the eggs. I would have thought personally that she was already just staring at it as she's thinking about what she's doing and what have you. So I wouldn't say it's like a bad thing. Maybe this is something that was intentional, but yeah. I think that was one of my gripes at the moment.
For me, well, I believe it's a really strong beginning, especially a lot of things are happening right from the get-go, and it's very good to hook readers. I do like the fact that it has enough exposure without being overly descriptive, because over description, especially at the beginning of stories, especially in the beginning of paragraph, of the first paragraphs, tends to lose readers. I do feel that the overly long run on sentences tend to make it a little bit heavy, especially for you to follow on whatever's happening since you are just like being presented by the story the first time. And I do really like, for example, the difference in length from the second paragraph to the third paragraph. That adds a lot of musicality and makes everything be more dynamic. I would recommend Liam to shorten sentences a little bit, divide them so that way it's a little bit sharper, a little bit quicker to catch the attention of the readers. Keep a look on those repetitions, like Jashi said, and try to divide paragraphs a little bit and play with uh the rhythm of reading. A good way of doing this is by reading the stuff that you're writing out loud, the way that you just did, Tim, and then the way that I would read this personally would be: she looked over the four eggs nestled in the rock bed. She headed for them with occasional bursts of her flaming breath. They had been kept safe in this place before her long sleep, while magic had drained from the world before finally returning. And then make the next thing a separate paragraph. Make that a very poignant, very, this is something that's happening. Magic finally returned. Why was magic not here? Like the very strong statements that are being inferred by this, I would just leave this kind of separate from the rest and start looking at the rest of the paragraphs and this sentence structures and everything with with the same mindset. So that way you're not only exposing the readers to what the story is by the words, but also by the way that you're choosing to make the actual like structure of everything. I would recommend having very short sentences that could contrast with the long ones. I feel like it would go very well with a scene like this because it's action, but also her reflecting. And you can see those differences in the action being very sharp and the sentences being very telling and very to the point, where the emotional side can have that proper, like, very drawn out, very, oh my God, this is kind of almost like an internal monologue or just a torrent of emotions or feelings or everything that's happening that will go also like way down where she starts getting attacked. I feel like that rhythm could help with the dynamism of the prologue because I feel like it's a very strong one for
It
starters.
is.
So it would be ways to highlight it and make it even better.
I think
Yay.
just the general genre of fantasy kind of lends itself to those big paragraphs and those run-on sentences and all that. So, thanks J.R.R. Tolkien for that.
Yay.
All right. So we're gonna move on to chapter one here. I'll probably read, what do you want, like two, three paragraphs, and then we can do feedback.
Yay.
Okay. So chapter one, Will, day two, 23 August, 2173 CE. Late morning light came through the main window of the apartment as Will set his glasses down on the bar, separating the main room from the small kitchen. He tried to navigate the series of blurs he currently saw as his apartment to find the duct tape to at least do a temporary repair. Just one more problem in the series of problems that had been his life in the past 3 years. Finding the tape, he sat back down to start the repair. He had needed corrective lenses for his vision since early childhood, but had never gotten corrective implants for his eyes or even old-fashioned contacts, just his glasses with their integrated augmented reality view. Slowly, he made the connections for his AR glasses lined up at the busted hinge before using some old-fashioned duct tape to hold them together. The temple piece had broken at the flex hinge as he was putting them on after waking up. Putting them on, he looked around to see if any augmented reality information came through. Looking at the Kabbalah poster on the wall, the image of the ten Sephiroth took a three-dimensional form. So that much worked at least. Looking out into the parking lot, he picked a work van from a significant distance away. Pseudo, range find, he commanded the glasses. 10.5 meters appeared under the work van and the glasses AR display. Important function number 2 worked. William took off his glasses, reducing the world around him to a series of blurs again, and cleaned the lenses with the bottom of his gray t-shirt. He could have used AI-powered glasses designed to read surface thoughts instead of using verbal commands, but those were much more expensive than his old pair of AR glasses he had, and he didn't trust most AI technology. All right, A plus for not trusting the AI
Hell
technology.
yeah.
All right, what are your thoughts on our opening paragraphs here?
Personally, I think it's very solid. You're kind of getting an idea of the world as you're kind of reading it. Like you could tell me this is a dystopian novel. That's great. But what makes it dystopian is, for me, is honestly the technology that's involved. And just going into the technology is kind of hooking me right now. Not even kind of, it is hooking me. I don't like AI either.
I think one of the strongest things that I see from the get-go is that Liam is doing a very good job the showing us from the very beginning that this is a very different character, a very different person that is living a very different life from the prologue. The narration feels different, it feels less urgent and kind of like monotone in a very intentional way to show how life is for Will specifically, to show that there's not the same urgency that we saw in the prologue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a very strong point. Even in third person, even if it's not like a first person, we're fully immersed in his brain, you can clearly see that difference, and that helps you immerse with the story even more. The slower pacing feels absolutely intentional, and you can really be like, oh yeah, it's just another day in this guy's life. I do see the repetitions uh, uh kind of like issue happening stronger now with the glasses description on the paragraph, and it's a little bit tricky because it's an explanation of a technology that is probably very relevant to the story. I would recommend finding ways to not repeat the words like glasses or AR or augmented reality and everything that frequently within the same paragraph. For example, the last sentence of the third paragraph that I said that the old pair of AR glasses he had been speaking about the AR glasses before. So I think it would be okay if he said like the old pair he had, because then the reader can infer that he's talking about the glasses. That could help with the rhythm. Other than that, I really like it.
All right, let's get a couple more paragraphs here then. All right. Putting them back on, he pulled out his tablet to check the calendar. The phone bill and the electric bill were both due in 2 days, around the same time the deposit from his last job was expected to hit his account. That deposit should cover those expenses, but he still had no idea how he was going to pay next month's rent. I need some fucking whiskey, he muttered. Pulling up his drink tracker, he saw it had only been a week since his last drink. One of these days he would make it an entire month sober, but today was not that day. He looked at his account balance to see if there was enough for a half pint of bourbon. 27 cents displayed on the tablet screen. Well, fuck. Looks like today is a dry day, he groused as he pulled out his nicotine vape to drag on. Blowing a cloud of vapor, he looked over at the coffee pot, but he already had it. Ooh, excuse me. But he had already had his half, and his roommate would want her share of it. Freelance jobs were getting to be few and far between, and after the divorce, He had lost his job as a data integrity technomancer, making sure computer recorded data could be transferred to a form that a divination could be performed on, and then translating the divination results into something that could be analyzed by a computer for business predictions. Mostly, this involved finding spelling and math errors in spreadsheets before creating summations that could be handled by a divination specialist. Trained monkey work, in his opinion, but he still needed to be a fully qualified mage to do it, which he almost was, having gotten the job before his last semester of mage training, and then having to drop out because he couldn't manage working and taking full-time classes. Getting a paycheck to pay rent and buy groceries for his wife and son were much more of an immediate need than getting the degree. Plus, he already had the job he had been training for at that point.
I feel his pain. Like I am not a mage personally, I wish, but I've been in very similar situations, and I think that's a very strong point when an author can transpose human reality and struggle into a reality that is different from ours. And it's very strong. It's a very good example of showing instead of telling the whole like I need some fucking whiskey. Like I like all of those things a lot of people have felt like that, and the people that haven't are extremely fortunate, and I hope they're very grateful for their life. Um, but I think again, very strong point on it. I mean, the title is Will Cast Spells for Food, so you kind of like have an idea where you're getting into, but seeing it from the character's perspective definitely kind of like sets the tone that the rest of the story is gonna come through. Uh Again, some repetitions, things like phone bill and electric bill could be replaced as the phone and electric bills, things like that. But it's very minor stuff that I'm pretty sure with like a skim through of like editing, he would notice. I was particularly like my attention was particularly drawn by the explanation of technomancy, and I almost wish that that was its own paragraph in itself, and we could go a little bit further into like like a statement like or more of like an explanation of kind of like how his life has been affected by it or like what it is and everything, because have a feeling that that's going to play a bigger part of the story. And the paragraph itself talks about him and about the past, and then kind of like about a more recent state. So I think that dividing that into two would make those stronger in themselves, instead of kind of like having to be merged as its own thing right now.
No, I completely agree with that. And on the point of like technomancy and such, I find that really interesting how he came up with it because it's like, you know, a data analysis in a magical world. Like I kind of like when authors go out of their way to make these roles and jobs for their characters. It gives the world more
Yeah.
life.
I've heard of urban fantasy, but I've never heard of spreadsheets being worked into magical realism, and I kind of love it.
It's you, but
I mean,
hopefully
yes.
you don't get to a place in which you have to cast spells for food.
Yeah, hopefully not. All
I
right,
mean, if
anything
you
else, or we
did
want to
have
do a
to
couple more
cast them.
paragraphs?
I really like it. All the things that I have seen are honestly pretty minor. And as a reader, taking out my beta reader hat and putting in my reader hat, I would just read this for like, I don't know, 3 hours and then lose track of time and then be like, fuck.
It's morning.
All right.
Yeah, literally.
So I just scroll down a little bit more. I'll do this last paragraph. We can check it on that, and then we'll move on to the next character. Not that he had ever been more than a few paychecks away from being homeless. Life was just too fucking expensive. Well, he never wanted to be a rich man. Enough money to pay the bills on auto pay with enough left over for groceries and a bit to toss in savings would be really nice. He blew out another cloud of vapor. Maybe not having money for booze today was a good thing. Days like this usually resulted in drinking too much, too fast, and feeling half suicidal for most of the night, which was the inevitable result of his lifelong problems with depression combined with stress and alcohol. No, he needed a new job, one with a decent payout. Any thoughts on these?
I think that that paragraph is so strong with showing how he has had problems with addiction and depression in general that the last sentence is probably not needed, and I think the paragraph would go harder and be stronger because it's not explaining something that it like it's not over explaining something that was already inferred by talking about his experiences and his life.
So you're saying the sentence, no, he needed a new job.
No, no, no. The of
Okay.
that part,
Which was
the
the
one that
inevitable
says,
result of his lifelong
yeah.
problems. Okay.
I feel like that makes it a little bit redundant, and by being redundant, it takes away from how hard that whole statement hits.
Yeah, I honestly, I think the paragraph did a really good job conveying that human emotion that's there. Saying that this is an inevitable result of his problems isn't hitting as hard as it should. Um, I do agree with you, Bia. Like it, if you just take that out, I think everything flows better that way.
All right.
One of the things, before
Oh,
we go, since we're giving tips, one of the things that I have learned especially very recently in my editing process that been going through is that we as authors, including me, tend to try to over-explain things for the readers because we're very afraid that our point is not going to become across, especially if it's a very important point. And it has taken a lot of me to kind of restrain myself from doing that and remember that if the reader is reading the story and engage with it, they will have, for the most part, my face, some sort of like critical thinking, and they're going to infer a lot of the things that you want them to infer. So there has to be a sort of trust that you have to put in your readers that they will understand the things that you want them to understand. And if you feel like you're not explaining them good enough, then it should be just like a revising of what went awry and how can I do it better instead of repeating things or like putting it kind of like in your face. Because the more that you put stuff in the face of people, we as humans tend to go against authority and against what other people wants us to do. So if you try to like make very in your face stuff, you're gonna be like, okay, I get it. I get it. I understood the first 5 times. So that's where all the whole idea of the last sentence and all of that is coming from in my brain right now.
okay. All right. Let me pop the story back up here. All right. Inks, day 2. The light coming in the window hurt her eyes and drew her out of her sleep. Inks heard Will fumbling around the other room. He wasn't being particularly loud, but she swore he did not know how to be quiet. Well, it was her fault for staying up too late last night. She looked over to the desk where the project she had just finished sat. A Gauss gun made to look like a handheld crossbow and a case of steel quarrels for it. This was the second one of these she had made. The other one was hanging on the wall beside her stealth armor. This one was for sale and should bring in enough to cover rent for next month. As much as Will stressed over covering all the bills himself, his freelance work wasn't enough, but she knew he wasn't even going to ask if she had a plan to deal with things. Stupid, stupid man. Well, Will was a sweetheart sometimes. He just got so stuck in his own head, it seemed like he forgot other people existed. This normally only got bad when he was stressed out or his depression was acting up, but that had been happening a lot lately. Not that she was blaming him. When she got laid off a few months ago, that had put them in a pretty tight spot. But last night she had made, but last night she had to outright yell at him just to pass the salt at dinner after asking multiple times because he zoned out so bad while in the middle of putting butter on a potato. If he had been looking at his phone or a book, she would have blamed that, but it was literally like his brain had just shut off for a moment and had to reboot like a computer. She couldn't understand it, but that was Will. Sometimes he got like that. Sweat started beating up on her green skin, and she felt the temperature around her rising. A hot flash while in the middle of a heat wave was not what she needed right now. She tried to fan herself off with the covers of the bed as she looked around for something to wear. Clothes were strewn over the floor between the boxes of machine parts, nuts, bolts, screws, rivets, circuit boards, and wires she used to make her gadgets, along with various engineering and programming manuals mixed in. She saw pair of clean black denim shorts that she hadn't gotten around to altering on top of her sewing machine. Those would work. Between the heat wave they were in and the hot flash, she wanted to put on as little as possible on her skin. People already assumed goblins were dirty. She didn't want to make it worse by being a sweaty mess because her body was deciding not to cooperate and making her feel like the temperature was double what it actually was. I'm so interested in this take on goblins.
This is great, guys.
I think I relate to Inks. Just saying. Sleep deprived, a goblin? Yep, that's me.
I mean, I think that's literally your job title.
Oh, wait.
We have to change it from gremlin to
Oh, yeah, that's
goblin.
right. It was Gremlin, not Goblin.
It's the same thing, I guess.
It's pretty
At
close.
least right now.
I don't think Inks would agree with that.
Okay, maybe not. I think she would probably. She seems like the type that would bring up like fantasy racism. And yeah, we'll probably not call her a gremlin.
What about the writing? Because I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I want to make sure that I give you a chance to
So,
talk.
so I really like how we're getting this character and we're trying to show off the bat her relationship with Will, the other character. Personally, when it comes to multi-pov stories, it's really hard for authors to kind of connect both characters to each other in a way. This, in my opinion, does a really good job at it. Like, you have Inks talking about her life, but also explaining, hey, I want to help Will too. I notice these things and blah blah blah, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think one of the things that is happening with this book that I personally really like is limited third person, in which we can really see that we can't fully trust 100% any narrator. And I love unreliable narrators because they it's not like they're lying, but they're definitely leaving out some information. And learning about context from other characters, from other points of view, I think helps build both of the characters way stronger. I really like it. I have the same feedback that I had when we started with Will, in which I believe he's doing a good job in separating the types, the ways that he's narrating each character, just to really emphasize the fact that this is a different person and a different way that they see the world around them. And it's very subtle things. But I feel like, for example, Will is a little bit more matter of fact and kind of more action driven in the way that the narration exists, and Inks has a little bit more of like a slow paced internal monologue kind of like situation going on. I think more on this than all the other ones that we should have some breathing space to emphasize all of that, because there's a lot of very strong things that are happening in the narration that I feel are being drawn out by other strong things, like having like not conflicting, but like having two ideas that are very important because they're building the world around us and the characters around us in the same paragraph. I know I'm being like picky about paragraphs. I'm sorry, but there's not a lot to be picky at. I don't even see like a lot of repetitions in this part, so that's why I'm like, uh, paragraphs. But that breathing space would give the readers a moment to catch themselves and internalize the information that is being displayed to them and immerse themselves even more on the story.
All right. Let's do, I think, maybe one more batch of paragraphs, and then we will, unfortunately, probably be done since this is a podcast and people don't want to listen to me narrate this entire book for 8 hours.
Maybe
But
one
we
day,
do.
you don't know.
I mean, absolutely one day.
2026 StoryForge audiobooks, all of them voiced by Tim.
Hey, I'm
All
here
of
for
them.
it. I am here for it. All right. She pulled on the shorts, wincing slightly at how much her tail was pulling them down in the back. Even if she bothered to get goblin-specific clothing, most goblins didn't have tails. They were either common goblins or the blue-skinned snow goblins. While having a semi-prehensile tail came in handy, it did not make finding clothes that fit any easier. Buying used human children's clothes at thrift shops and then altering them to accommodate her tail was cheaper and only slightly more of a pain. Oh well, not like anyone would actually say anything to her for walking around the apartment naked. except for Will, who could be surprisingly puritanical about clothing. However, he would give up the argument quickly. In her mind, standing naked in front of the freezer with a fan blowing directly on her seemed like a much better idea than getting dressed with the way she felt. Tapping one of her eyebrow piercings, she pulled up a weather report that showed an AR for her eye implants. It was currently 92 with a feels like temperature of 98 and a forecast high of 98 with a heat index of 105. If this heat flash didn't go away, she was going to be miserable all day. Tapping the next piercing, she brought up her messages from last night. There was the text from Aiko, who was finally deciding to talk to her again. Inks wondered why she even put up with the girl, though technically Aiko was older at 29 compared to Inks's 20. Since goblins matured faster than humans and had correspondingly shorter lifespan, Inks was already at what could be considered middle age, late middle age, if the menopause system symptoms were to be believed. After refusing to talk to her for a month because she forgot to respond to one message for an entire day, Aiko had messaged her asking for a date tonight. If Aiko hadn't been so hot, Inks might have considered blowing her off. But Aiko was absolutely gorgeous for a catfolk, and they usually got along. Plus, Inks wanted someone to clean out her pipes because Will certainly wouldn't. Sex was never on his priority list. He only rarely seemed to show that he felt that type of attraction. And while she would enjoy having that type of relationship with Will, she didn't want to push him and lose him as a friend. That took a turn. I'm still here for it though.
I love the turn, to be honest, because it's like never let them know your next move. But I have to comment on something that for me personally, me, Beatrice, as a reader, I'm like, I love this so much. And it's something that we were talking about before, which is like integrating like technology with magical realism and urban fantasy and all of that in ways that feel very real. And piercings that are connected to AR shit. Oh my god. I don't seem like it, but once in my past I had about 30 piercings along like in my entire body. Several of them in my ears, in my face and all of that, and I am a former professional piercer and I worked on that for a couple of years. So seeing something that is part of people's lives that is usually seen as just mere aesthetic being extremely functional is like my heart, my brain. I love the steak. It's one of those reactions as a better reader that it's like you talk to the author and you'll be like, I feel like people would connect with this in a way that I don't even know if you know. But I think that's great. And I'm here for it. I'm very happy. I really like the turn as well on like I personally started the story believing like this is a married couple. And then was like, okay, it's not. This is a type of relationship that is maybe not the type of relationship that I thought. Maybe they're married, they're poly. Maybe they're just friends. Maybe whatever, because she said that she likes seeing him as a friend when people are weird. Um, good, still good showing of world building and character building and showing Inks's personality in the narration. And I really like the drama. I feel like it's a very good thing to break out kind of like the sedentary and like the monotone showing of like how their lives are going and a way to keep the readers engaged while still showing that this is a mundane day for them and not trying to overcompensate just to be engaging.
I think one of the nitpicky parts I had, and this isn't necessarily bad, is that when it was talking about like if Eiko hadn't been so hot, Inks might have considered blowing her off. It goes on to say, but Eiko was absolutely gorgeous for a catfolk. And usually I really don't like when the sentences are that repetitive. Like I would probably substitute Eiko in the second sentence for she, just to keep the flow going, but I think that's just me being nitpicky. It might make more sense with his voice. I don't,
I,
what do you
I,
think,
f-
Thea?
I feel like also with those two sentences particularly, I would just completely get rid of the second one and just make one strong statement. If Eiko hadn't been such a gorgeous catfolk, she would have considered blowing her off. And that makes it even stronger.
Yeah, definitely. Combining the two sentences would be so much better and give more weight to the paragraph. And I think plus inks could have, it you could start there and just make a new paragraph altogether and it gives that more weight as well. Like it shifts the focus in a sense. I think
Breathing space,
yeah,
please.
breathing space.
All right.
Also, AR piercings. Hell yeah.
Any last thoughts on this one?
I really would recommend this book to probably everyone I know personally.
The,
Um,
this
Same.
this has such it touches on such familiar topics that like a lot of authors have done before, but in a different way than I've seen before. Like, all right, yeah, goblins living with people. Okay, whatever. I've never goblins having menopause. Like that's something that never even occurred to me, and I think it's hilarious. And it just it's such a. I mean, I know we've only read 12 paragraphs, whatever. It's a very unique twist on thing. Well, to be fair, I've read more than that because that this is on my favorite shelf on StoryForge. Um, but it's just a unique twist on like a genre and kind of like an idea that we've seen before. Um, yeah, I really like this story.
I think that one of the strengths that Liam has in his writing and everything, as far as I have seen for what we have read, because I have been forcing myself to not read this on purpose because I knew we are gonna read it from it, because I have had it in my shelves for a while too in Storyforge. Is that he is able to touch in very human life and human topics in a way that still feels removed enough from reality to be able to stomach it. Because I
Hmm.
understand how these topics can be difficult for some people to read about, and for some people, like they could be even triggering, especially dealing with things like addiction or being worried about age and being worried about money and all of those things. And I personally, as a reader, really like to see things that happen in real life not being sugar coated or not being completely ignored. Because for me, like, I explore reality through books, and as an author, also I like uh talking about things that are difficult to talk about but still need to be talked about. This is obviously because of the title, but also for what we have seen, is talking about the struggle of everyday regular like people that a lot of people nowadays more than ever are going through. It's doing it in a way that is digestible even for people that are not necessarily ready to talk about the real life stuff. And I think it's a good approximation of like, this is a situation that's happening. Maybe it's not happening to you, but it's happening to someone else. And it probably is going to be a very good conversation starter in like for those very difficult topics. And I personally like really, I think it's my favorite thing about the book so far. And the AR piercings, because I had also magic system related to piercings. I love this man.
I also kind of feel like kind of piggybacking off your topic. This is like a very real to thing to talk about, but I somehow feel like adding in this fantasy twist of magic and AR and technology is somehow cushioning the blow of this reality. So it makes it so much easier to kind of swallow that pill.
Yeah.
And that is such a difficult thing to do for many stories. Like a lot of books I read are very on the nose with these topics. This isn't as on the nose, and it's good for me. It's refreshing in a way.
Well, if anyone else would like to read it, we will put a link to the story in the description. You do have to have a StoryForge account to read it, so we encourage you to sign up. Make sure you use that referral code podcast. So that is our show for today. If you're interested in seeing some more of these episodes, we'd be happy to do them. Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you at the Forge.
Bye.